From one point of view, this is a video about 3 injustices. From another point of view, this is a video about countless injustices.
Fatal blow! Is that gonna work? No, it won't! The breaker! This is the last opportunity for Nicolas. And no! He walks right into it! And the disrespect! Sonic Box wins the 8th EVO!
Outraged? I'm barely surprised. This is a country where women are allowed to drive a car. They're not allowed to be in the company of any man other than a close relative. They're required to adhere to a dress code that would make a Mary Noel Nunn look like Malibu Barbie. They beheaded 121 people last year for robbery, rape, and drug trafficking. They have no free press, no elected government, no political parties, and the royal family allows the religious police to travel in groups of 6 carrying nightsticks, and they freely and publicly beat women. But Brutus is an honorable man. Am I outraged? No, Steve. No, Chris. No, Mark. That is Saudi Arabia, our partners in peace.
The flag of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia consists of 2 design elements, both in white against a field of dark green. In the center is the Arabic text in a traditional calligraphic script of the Shahada, the Muslim profession of faith. Many flags of Islamic theocracies have incorporated the text of the Shahada over the centuries. But to the Saudi regime's Muslim critics, both those living abroad and those living within the country who risk and sometimes lose their lives in the course of dissent, the use of the Shahada is deeply, tragically ironic. To them, the Saudi government's constant brutalization of the population is not only reprehensible, but un-Islamic. Below the Shahada, running horizontally and seeming almost to underline the text, is a rendering of a sword. The sword is, allegedly, meant to represent safety and justice. In context with the regime's conduct, which ranks consistently among the worst in the world for human rights, it seems more like a deliberate mockery of both concepts, filtered through the might-makes-right inhumanity that's universal among rich autocrats the world over. In short, it represents the deep wounds they carve into their populace every single day. And for those communities abroad who have seen cornerstone events bought out to sanitize the crimes of the Saudi government in a process that has come to be known as sports washing, it represents a wound all its own, albeit one much less fatal and, frankly, much less important. But a wound nonetheless, one that can do profound damage to a community if left unhealed. As of around a month ago, we in the fighting game community have found ourselves wounded in that way, and it now falls upon us to try and stem the bleeding. But how? I don't have an answer to that. At least not one better than the answers other people have come up with. And there's been a lot of debate on that front over the past month or so since the news broke. Most of that debate revolves around whether or not people should even attend EVO anymore. The argument against is fairly obvious. You should always think twice about giving money to people who, to put it lightly, don't share your values. Especially when you can be certain that they will actively use that money in ways that go directly against your values. It's the same argument people made a couple of years ago against playing Hogwarts Legacy, without pirating it anyway. Albeit on a larger scale, since J.K. Rowling, wealthy and influential as she is not the leader of the 12th largest country in the world. And for her many faults, I don't believe she's ever murdered a journalist. Arguments in favor of continuing to attend EVO have also been made, including emphatically by Sonic Fox. The argument is essentially that going to EVO, particularly if you belong to one of the demographics the regime would like to wipe off the face of the map, is a chance to spite the Saudi government to its face. Maybe even, if you do well enough at a tournament, to take some prize money out of their pockets. The point of comparison I've seen made is to Jesse Owens, a track and field athlete who won gold at the 1936 Olympics hosted in Nazi Germany, and as such exposed the inherent falseness of Nazi propaganda about Aryan supremacy. That's maybe a hefty comparison to make, but I get it. And to be honest, I get both arguments in general. I'm not sure where I stand, personally. Collective boycotts against oppressive regimes have some history of success, including famously against apartheid. But that required a ton of financial pressure from many different areas. The FGC on its own doesn't have near enough purchasing power to make a dent on that front. Especially if, as has been alleged, the shell company that bought EVO intends to run it at a loss, or at least doesn't care if it does. As for the counter-argument, the one that invokes people like Jesse Owens, that definitely sounds appealing, but it has its own problems. Chief among them is that might be exactly what the regime wants. After all, the reason they've made so many big financial splashes like this is because they want to improve their image abroad. What better way to do this than to buy into a community famous for its diversity? To say, see, we can play ball, look at all the queer faces at this event we're paying for. Meanwhile, being LGBT within their own borders will continue to be punished by indefinite detention and even the death penalty. There are, of course, many more points being made than just those two. Fighting game discourse online moves a mile a minute, and trying to summarize everything that people have been saying in the last month or so would take hours. But I'm not going into that kind of depth because I'm not trying to find the right answer in all this. I don't know if there is one, at least not in the sense of one big capital R, capital A right answer that will lift us all collectively out of this mess. So what am I? In 2022, Ryan Walters was elected state school superintendent for the state of Oklahoma. Almost immediately, he began using his office for the kinds of things that would have made him fit right in with the Saudi ruling class. Among other things, he instituted a deeply corrupt scheme to put a Bible in every classroom in a direct violation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, led attempts to ban books which he accused of promoting quote-unquote gender ideology, and cheer-led so-called bathroom bills explicitly designed to facilitate the harassment of transgender people, including trans students. A headline from the Washington Post from March of last year sums up the sickening effect of the actions taken both by Walters and others like him. In states with laws targeting LGBT issues, school hate crimes quadrupled. This culminated, with tragic inevitability, in the death of 16-year-old non-binary high school student Nex Benedict. Their death was originally reported as a murder, the result of physical bullying they had been the victim of by other students the previous day. An autopsy later revealed the cause of death to be suicide by overdose. But the original verdict was not entirely inaccurate. Ethically, if not legally. Nex Benedict was murdered. And their murderer was the man put in charge of education for hundreds of thousands of students. A man who emerged from his act of legislative child killing completely unscathed. At the beginning of this video, I used the Saudi flag as a shorthand for the state of Saudi Arabia's foundational rot. How the ideals they claim through their flag to represent are constantly contradicted by the actions they take every day. But the Saudi regime isn't the only example of this. There are examples all over the world, and many of them are in our own backyard. Do you remember this video? It was uploaded by top FGC YouTuber Maximilian Dude in 2020, after a deluge of sexual harassment allegations from EVO personnel all the way to the top of the organization led to the planned online-only event to be canceled that year. It's heartbreaking, as is all of the coverage from 2020, especially going back to it now, because EVO has once again fallen into the hands of abusers. And unlike in 2020, there's no clear way to hold them to account. A common response I've heard to people who express alarm about all this is that it's unlikely that much will change on the ground. Frankly, I don't disagree. The Saudi regime would be insane to take an already precarious situation and draw even more negative attention to it, though that's not to say they haven't absolutely done that already in the past, particularly in events happening within Saudi Arabia itself. But isn't it worth being alarmed by the fact that the community is now forced to either boycott the largest event on the calendar or accept that it's being used to line the pockets of some of the most despicable people on Earth? People who, if they had the means to, would literally kill many of them, including many of the top players in their respective games? Isn't that something worth caring about? And yes, I know, no nation is morally stainless. I've already gone out of my way to show that I agree with that point. If the US government funded fighting game tournaments, I would encourage you to criticize that too, and even boycott those events if you were in a position to. They don't. But the Saudi government does. And their purchase of EVO, to me, represents the victory of everything that EVO ought not to stand for, of everything the community shouldn't stand for, of the strong abusing the weak, be it a wealthy monarchy or a bigoted state official or the abusive elements within the community itself. We have had to fight collectively for years for every inch of what we have now to build a community where, for all its flaws, everyone can, some way, somehow, be made to feel welcome. In a world that can sometimes be so incredibly cruel, especially to the most vulnerable among us, the FGC has crawled over broken glass to be a place that isn't always like that. A place where no matter what your position in the arbitrary hierarchy of the wider world, you have the chance to prove yourself. And simply to be yourself. And then a bunch of rich assholes showed up, bought Evo, and in doing so might as well have put up a big neon sign reading none of that fucking mattered. That's why I'm angry. And that's why I grieve. But I don't despair. Because, yes, the bad guys won. If I haven't convinced you of that by now, nothing will. But they won't win forever. Nobody does. If you've been wondering why I brought up Ryan Walters earlier, I understand. It probably felt like something of a non sequitur. Frankly, a part of that is because I want as many people as possible to know about Nex Benedict. Telling more people about what happened to them isn't close to real justice, but it's at least something. But here's the main reason I brought it all up. If you know anything about Oklahoma politics, you already know what happened to Ryan Walters. He resigned. In disgrace, likely as a result of continued pressure from pretty much every strata of Oklahoma politics, up to and including the governor. Incidentally, that's another reason I chose Walters as an example. I'm not interested in strictly partisan polemics on this channel, and ultimately the effort to oust Ryan Walters was heavily bipartisan. His replacement, Lindell Fields, has already stated his intent to cancel the Bibles in Schools plan, and so far hasn't engaged in the kind of culture war scapegoating of trans kids that got Nex Benedict killed. Nearly every Oklahoma educator I've spoken to, some of whom have met Fields personally, have said that they're optimistic for the first time in years. An optimism that, at the beginning of the year, they never thought they'd ever feel again. It took a concerted effort over many years from many, many people. It would be hard to narrow down the cause of Walter's ouster to one or two things. Incidentally, people who know the story would badger me if I neglected to mention that at least one factor was an allegation, albeit of dubious veracity, that at one point he showed porn in his office. But in the broadest sense, I think it comes down to this. Cruelty inevitably burns itself out. If all you do is hurt people, you'll never have real allies or even real friends. Sure, people will say they're on your side, sometimes just because they're afraid of you. But they're never really on your side. Nobody is. Because all you know how to do is hurt people. You can't make real friends. Maybe if you could examine yourself just a little bit, you'd be able to become the kind of person who could. But if cruelty is what you keep foremost in your heart, you'll never be able to do that. All you'll ever be able to do is hurt people. And those around you will know that. And whenever they get a chance to protect the world from you, however it presents itself, they'll take it. And you will have no recourse because you've driven away all the people who could come to your rescue. After all you've ever done is hurt people. And that's true whether you're a state superintendent with bad hair or a Saudi robber baron buying fake affection from athletes and fans. I'm not saying every cruel person gets theirs, of course. But if they do, it seems like it often happens in the same way. And seeing that play out this time made me and a lot of other people who really needed it hopeful. But, like I said, this isn't something any of them expected. And I want you to think about what that would be like. To put yourself in their shoes for just a bit. An educator, in a state that pays educators among the worst in the whole country, and the guy in charge of the whole thing is using his office to insult you daily, saying things about your profession that, frankly, I don't care to repeat here. And for all you know, he's going to be around for a while. Sure, it's a term-limited position, so he won't be around forever, but 8 years is enough time to do a lot of damage. It'll feel like an eternity. What would you do? Personally, I would have found work elsewhere, and understandably, a lot of people did. But many didn't. They stood their ground. They did all they could to ensure that, regardless of all the bile being spewed from the top, their students felt safe. And I think that's what we should do too. We'll never be able to overthrow the Saudi government, but we can do everything within our power to make it clear, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that these people do not fucking speak for us. This part of the video was supposed to play over a montage of wholesome FGC moments, and I got together clips of all the really famous ones. But I realized while editing this that that's not really what this is about. Sure, I could show you Tokido's iconic fighting game is something so great moment. It's awesome, obviously, but we've all seen it 1,000 times. What I'm talking about here are the millions of small kindnesses we pay each other every day. The kind that we don't think to record because they're not big and they don't happen in front of thousands of people. But the kind of interactions that actually hold a community like this together. I have a few off the top of my head. The person I played on Fightcade who literally walked me through the basics of Samurai Showdown 5, another person I played in Pokemon Close Combat who basically fixed my entire game plan for my main in one day. One time I got bodied in GBVR on one of my first times playing online, and the person who beat me sent me words of encouragement that legitimately sounded like they belonged in a shonen battle anime. Tragically, I couldn't figure out how the chat worked on PS5 and was thus unable to respond, so hopefully mentioning that moment here will serve as some form of atonement. Those are the kinds of moments that, when added up over a long period of time, can make a person feel seen and safe when they feel neither seen nor safe anywhere else in the world. And that's something all of us have the power to do, no matter who runs the big and shiny event in Vegas. I'd like to end this video with a tweet that was published on the account Classic Wholesome FGC Quotes earlier this year. The page was created explicitly to serve as a contrast to the well-known and often very funny Scrub Quotes page, but after a while new submissions slowed down and eventually it reached a point where there were no new tweets for months. But the admin of the page had a really thoughtful response to that. Maybe people weren't submitting new wholesome moments because common decency had become such a norm that people began to take it for granted. That people no longer felt they had to remark upon positive interactions because they were the standard. Personally, I agree with this, and my own experience bears that out, but you may reasonably not. In fact, at least one commenter on that tweet does disagree. But I think we would all like to live in a world where we all unequivocally agree with that. And I think we all have a little bit of power to help make that happen. I don't mean to sound naive, but if that's the only form of resistance offered to us, as kindness sometimes is during times of immense injustice, then maybe, just maybe, it'll be enough.